Hi, this is Kiran Mandral. I'm the Ideas Editor at She the People TV, and we are here at the She the People Online Summit where we're having a couple of days of lovely conversations with people across the board from art, from politics, from culture, from millennial women, women in entertainment, in policy. And today we have with us right now Ashwin Sanghi, the best-selling author of the Bharat series of the Bloody Steps. Hi, Ashwin. Good to see you here.
Hey Kiran, always a pleasure to see you.
So, Ashwin, congrats on the latest book, The Vault of Vishnu. It's a lovely read. I just finished it a few days ago. And like all your books, Ashwin, this book too has such depth of research, such depth of detailing that goes into your books. Now, I know that the research process is something that really fascinates you. And I suspect that the research is what interests you more than the writing. Am
Oh,
I right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me, Ashwin, when you started out and you wrote your very first book, The Rosabelle Line, and it got self-published, and we all know the story behind all the infinite rejections that happened. Did you ever see mythology playing such an important role in all your forthcoming books? I mean, when The Rosabelle Line came out under Ashwin Sanghi and it went on to become a bestseller, at that point, did you think that you would continue in this vein?
Frankly, no, Kiran. I mean, mythology had been a part of my growing up years because of my grandfather, who sent me several books related to mythology, but I had never thought that it would become a central part of my life. Uh, and genuinely speaking, for me, mythology per se does not really interest me. It is the possibility that mythology could have linkages with elements of history, with elements of science, with elements of philosophy. So wherever those overlap zones, wherever I observe those overlaps, that is where the excitement comes. So mythology is a part of my life, but it isn't the only part of my life.
Definitely. And we've seen this interlinking coming up in all your stories, whether it is the cosmic twin, whether it is all the little things, detailings that you sort of take up and you bring out and build up an entire plot around it. So, Ashwin, I have always been curious in terms of when you interweave the past and the present, and you have to weave it in such a way that you don't slow down the pace as well as you bring in enough detailing. What are your primary challenges? Do we have Ashwin here? I think there's been some yeah.
No, I think what they're doing is basically they are sort of making sure that when it's only you talking, then they have the screen entirely focused on you, which makes sense. Now, in the meantime, of course, the guys at the back end have asked me to share a link on Facebook, Kiran. So do I do that, or do I wait on? What do I do? Anyway, we played by ear. So the thing is that the way I see it is that the biggest challenge is in terms of when you spend a year researching something. Like for example, this particular book, the latest, The Vault of Vishnu, it ended up taking almost about a year worth of research, which included several weeks of travel within China. Now I'm just realizing now that the timing was so impeccable, because had I been researching this book in this year and planning to publish it next year, I don't know how my research plans would have been affected, because China is obviously no go for the moment. Any place is no go at the moment.
Moment, absolutely. We're all stuck.
But having said that, when you spend about a year researching a book, then you are excited about bringing all that research to the fore in terms of your novel. And very often you end up compromising either the story or the pace of that story. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
and so it's always that trade off, that how much research do I put in, and how do I make sure that even with the research coming in, the pace is not compromised. And that was my biggest challenge with virtually every book in the Bharat series. That, how to maintain that. Somewhere or the other, something has got to give. I mean, I realized that with the Rosabal line, where there was a ton of research which made it a very compelling read, but it was also a very difficult read, because of the fact that so much of research had been built into that book. The way I see it, the golden rule still applies that easy reading is damn hard writing. So we still need to sort of work at it again and again. And we as storytellers want to try and bring in all of those elements that we are now aware of. And we at times we realize that no, for the good of the story, I need to leave this out. And that's the most difficult thing to do.
Absolutely. I think for the good of the story, leaving things out, kill your darlings, as uh,
Exactly.
a writer has wisely said. And for those of you who don't really, I don't think there are many of you out there, but if you haven't read the Rosabelle line, it's a compelling retelling of what could have happened if after Christ came out from the tomb, and the mythology
Absolutely.
about where he could have
Absolutely.
possibly gone. I think all of Ashwin's books have been so interesting in that they have taken something completely different in each book. So, if the Rosabelle line was about Jesus Christ and his possible stay over at Kashmir, then the Vault of Vishnu is some a Pandava prince who's gone all the way to China. There is the Sialkot saga, which was about the partition and back and forth there, and the Keepers of the Kal Chakra. There's so many different stories that he has done where he has looked at the past and he has brought it in context with the present, and his characters in terms bridge the gap between the past and the present most beautifully. I think the challenge for the reader, Ashwin's books are quick reads, they're easy reads, but they're not facile reads. They're books for readers who want to get to the meat of the story, who want something to challenge themselves, and that's what makes them interesting. Ashwin, I've always wondered. This is something that I found very interesting in all your books. From the very first books, is that you're a male writer writing thrillers, and you've been writing them with the format of the chase, the plot, the quest, and all that. But you do very certainly, and because we are she the people, I must talk about this. You do very certainly have very strong female protagonists. So I've always been curious to know whether that has been a conscious decision to have female characters playing a central role in your stories. Have you? Or does that just happen? How do you decide and how do you build on these characters? How do you create them? In fact, I think in this latest one, there is the investigating officer, the one who is doing the whole thing is a lady, and the whole I find it very encouraging that you put women into a thriller and you give them all the hijinks that you'd see in a typical thriller which focuses on males, and there is so much also, depth and nuance to their character that you bring in. So could you tell us a little bit about how you create these characters? One sec, I think.
Because uh,
Yeah,
first,
yeah,
let me give you a sense of, Kiran, why do I have female protagonists, or for that matter, at times antagonists?
antagonists also, right?
Um, so the I have always believed really in the power of Shakti. For me, in my life, I grew up in a business family where it was taken for granted that my first port of call was to worship Lakshmi ji. But it was my grandfather who told me that, hey, listen, wherever Lakshmi goes, Saraswati, or wherever Saraswati goes, Lakshmi wants to be there. So
Oh,
if you really want to worship something, then worship Saraswati, because Lakshmi will automatically come there.
interesting.
Uh, so in that sense, I was my purpose, my ambition in life was to be able to occupy that coveted spot between Lakshmi and Saraswati. The Devi Jis have had a very, very central role in my life in that sense.
Okay.
And I'm holding up for the moment my wrist, and it has five dhagas on it. Kiran, can you see?
Yes, and they
There
all.
are there are five dhagas on it, and those five dhagas actually are representative of five very important shaktis in my life. The first shakti in my life is my mother, uh, because she basically gave me the entire the habit of reading and writing actually comes from my mom.
Okay.
Uh, the second Shakti in my life is my wife Anu. Had it not been for her, I would have not started writing that first book. The third Shakti in my life is my sister Vidhi, who has in fact always told me that Ashwin, do what your heart tells you rather than doing what you are expected to be doing. The fourth Shakti in my life is my Rakhi sister, a, a very sweet little girl called Farah, who, in fact, Kiran, you have met.
Met.
And Farah is the one who brings a lot of, I would say, playfulness to my life. And finally, of course, the final Shakti in my life is Ma Shakti herself. Who, when I look at the words that I write, I really feel that it's almost as if they've come from somewhere else, as if Ma is helping me write those words. So these are the so-called five Shaktis of my life. And I have always believed that Shakti, people think of Shakti almost in some ways as opposite to Shiva, or as a part of Shiva. You know, that Shiva Shakti relationship is not fully understood. I mean, when you look at, let's say, for example, the concept of darkness and light, are they really opposites? Or are we saying that, hey, listen, darkness is simply an absence of light?
Right.
Or are we saying that what is cold is simply an absence of heat? In that sense, I have never looked at Shakti as an opposite of Shiva. I've looked at it as an that Shiva is an absence of Shakti. That is the way I have always seen Shakti. That your fundamental source of energy is one, which is Shakti. And when you don't have enough of Shakti, then that is what you results in the masculine form or the masculine thought or the masculine energy, as it were. But it doesn't exist in and by itself.
Absolutely agreed. And it's a very interesting perspective that you bring about the Shakti and the absence of light being darkness. I think we all pay heed to that. I want to get into the fact that, Ashwin, in your books, you have, of course, there's mythology, there's science, there's geographies, there's all of that. And when you are writing these books, when you're trying to correlate the past and the present, are there elements of the past that you think we must pay heed to in the present that we neglect? And do you try to bring these elements out into your plots, into your characterizing?
Uh, Kiran, you know it better than me, but the truth of the matter is that I have been always one of those who believes that history repeats itself. So the patterns, it's almost cyclical. And very often, if you don't know where you've been, you can't know where you are going. So, in that sense, I believe that there is a lot of value from, sort of learning from the past. And then, unfortunately, human nature is the type that it doesn't necessarily learn from its mistakes. The one thing uh, the one thing that history teaches us is that we don't learn from history. So, uh, if we see the entire crisis that the world is going through today, uh, that this has happened before. There have been epidemics, there have been plagues, there have been world wars, and here we are back again, holed up in our homes, doing these online conferences because of the fact that we've utterly screwed up the world.
Absolutely.
So, and this is one of the big worries that I have in my mind. That listen, assuming that let's say 4 weeks from now, or 4 months from now, or 4 years from now, I don't know when, we have a situation where the world normalizes. Uh, what I'm really worried about is that we go back to what we consider to be normal, because I really genuinely believe that we should not be going back to what we consider to be normal. We can't carry on the way we were carrying on before this entire crisis broke. We need to have a reset button of some sort. Uh, Maybe that will be learning from history. So I think this is a good time for us to look back at all the great moments of challenges that happened, and to think in terms of how did human beings deal from it. We as human beings, we are an extremely powerful race. We appeared not so long ago in the history of the earth, but we immediately conquered it. But unfortunately, it is our strength which also makes us extremely fallible uh, and vulnerable. And we need to learn from that.
It's very interesting you talk about that. The fact that We're not so recently on this earth, and in the short while we've been here, of course, we made a complete mess of it, but we've also created some great culture, literature,
Absolutely.
history, and the fact that you traveled to China, it was so prescient. I think that your latest book is based
That's right.
partly in the past in China. So there is a lot of research available, for you to draw on to what you have written about. But do you see any parallels between our culture, our mythology, and their culture, their mythology that perhaps we are not aware of as lay people in the course of your research?
Well, sure. I mean, for me, the vault of Vishnu actually started with some very simple, uh, something that was very, very ordinary. I was standing at a roadside stall and I was having a cup of tea. And the guy asked me, he said, uh, "Saab, आप चीनी कम लेंगे या चीनी मार के लेंगे?" I mean, in the sense that, do you want extra sugar or do you want it, you know, uh, on
Little.
the lower side? And I was thinking to myself, I said, where does this word chini come from? And
Ah,
I suddenly realized that, hey, listen, both the things that have gone into this cup that I'm drinking, whether it is the word chai, or whether it's the word chini, they have come to us in some way and form from China. Now, when I started digging a little deeper, I realized that, hey, listen, when the travelers Wanzhang traveled from China to India, he was damn excited about the fact that he suddenly discovered, quote unquote, something called sugar, um, because he hadn't tasted sugar before that. And he found the sweet candies that he experienced in India so fascinating that he actually collected them so that he could carry them back for the Emperor Taizong. Now, what is really fascinating is that the first sugar processing plant comes up around the 19th century in India, and it is a Chinese businessman who sets up that first sugar refining mill in Bengal.
okay.
And so, which means, in other words, that maybe to a certain extent, a particular idea went from China, from India to China through Zhuangzhang, and then it suddenly gets lost in the haze of history, and then it comes back again to us in the 18th, 19th century in the form of a Chinese businessman setting up a plant at Achipur. So the point I'm making is that the connections between these two countries have been immense at various levels. The most common one, obviously, is Buddhism. We have this beautiful temple in Loyang, which is known as the White Horse Temple, where apparently these monks from India landed up carrying parchments and scripts, which were the word of Buddha, sometime around 72 AD. And then, of course, it was China which became the launching pad for Buddhism for many, many other countries. So, to my mind, the whether it is something as simple as sugar, whether it's something like Buddhism, or whether it is, for example, I was so fascinated when I visited the monastery in Shaolin, and right in the heart of Shaolin is this magnificent statue, which is of someone called Bodhidharma. And they revered Bodhidharma as the Indian prince, the Brahmin prince, who brought a new style of combat to China. And of course, Bodhidharma, of course, many Indians are not aware of the Bodhidharma story, but this is someone who traveled, who was a Pallava prince who traveled to China. And he wanted admission in the Shaolin monastery. And the abbot of the monastery refused to give him that admission. So he sat for almost about 19 odd years in meditation in a cave outside the monastery, to the extent that his shadow was imprinted on the opposite wall. But while he was sitting there in meditation, he needed to keep his body and his limbs moving and his circulation going. So he developed a yogic breathing technique. And of course, he had carried with him two very important martial arts from India, Silambam and Kalari prior to. And both of these he used along with yogic breathing in order to develop a routine. And eventually, the abbot of the monastery got fed up with Bodhidharma and granted him admission. And then he taught a bunch of monks his routines, which eventually became Kung Fu. Now, a lot of Indians are not aware of this, but there is so much of shared history, so much of shared, uh, and it wasn't a one-way street. There was a two-way sharing of knowledge. So this is what fascinates me and what I have tried to bring out through the Vault of Vishnu.
In these days of locked borders and these days of closed transport and flights being cut off, and it's interesting to hear about how we went back and forth between China and got something from
Yeah,
them.
and probably this would be a politically incorrect statement because at the point where we are all sharing the coronavirus with one another, I guess to a certain extent it is not politically expedient to be talking about this shared culture and shared history and shared heritage. But the point, and unfortunately, we are going to be moving into a time where I think, unfortunately, I foresee a situation where countries are going to become even more insular as we go along because of the fact that, I can't see a stage where we would be back to normal, back to business in the usual sense of the term. Think about this: a plane load of Chinese tourists arriving in Europe 6 months from now. I wonder as to how they will be dealt with. Would it be back to business as usual? I'm not sure.
Doubtful. Let us wait and watch, and let's discuss how you're using this time, though, Ashwin. Shelley's asked, how do you use this lockdown to think or write? Is it affecting productivity, or is it great for you?
Well, I must tell you, Kiran, I had not in my wildest dreams. I mean, people call me either a historical fiction writer, they call me a mythological fiction writer. The vast majority call me a conspiracy fiction writer, but in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have conjured up this particular conspiracy. This completely boggles the mind. As they say, fact is stranger than fiction. But what it has forced me to do is really sit at home. And I had, in any case, imagined that after releasing The Vault of Vishnu on the 23rd of Jan, I had decided that I would devote the first 3 months to working on a few projects outside the world of books, uh, creative projects, but outside the world of books. As it turns out, actually, these last 8 or 9 days worked because I was able to achieve a tremendous amount of output. Um, on some of these projects. And it's also suddenly given me the space to be able to start working on the seventh book in the Bharat series. So, because I don't know how long I'm going to be holed up here. Is it going to be 21 days? Is it going to be 42 days? Is it going to be, several weeks? I don't know. So I figure that I may as well make the best use of time. Uh, and I'm finding that I'm being able to do almost about 3 to 4 hours worth of writing every day, almost a couple of hours worth of reading every day. And the other thing I'm realizing is that for a long, long time, I have been rather sort of casual about my own health. The lubricant that spurs my writing is whiskey, and the lubricant that spurs my reading is usually a good cigar, and with very little exercise. So I've decided that these 21 days I'm going to exercise every day. So I've been exercising every day for the last 5 or 6 days. And I hope to carry that through till the lockdown period and even after.
So, can we hope to see what I talk about when I talk about running from you, Ashwin, next? Coming.
But
It's something that comes out of the COVID lockdown from Ashwin.
yeah, Kiran, honestly speaking, this is a time for looking both within and without. I mean, so my books are always usually about looking without and looking at the world beyond me. But I think these are moments when one suddenly realizes that one also needs to look within, and maybe it's the perfect opportunity to be able to introspect and see what has one been doing right and what has one been doing wrong.
Absolutely. Agree with you completely. Papa CJ has asked a question. What are the creative
Hi,
projects?
Papa. By the way, I'm saying hi to Papa. I'm waving to him. Yeah, even though he isn't my Papa.
He's Sarvajanic Papa. Big Papa. He's everybody's Papa, CJ. What are the creative projects you're working on outside of books, he asks.
So I had a thought to myself that I would like to be able to uh, write an OTT directly rather than simply writing a book and then having it adapted into OTT. So the thought I had was that if I can apply myself to writing detailed plot outlines for a novel, why can't I actually do that directly for you know I have never seen myself as a writer, Kiran. I have always seen myself much more as a storyteller. So whether you are telling a story for a book or whether you're telling that story for a illustrated novel or a comic or an OTT series or a movie or a play, frankly, they are all stories. So I think a time has come when we, as storytellers, if we consider ourselves to be storytellers, then in that case we should also be open to exploring other avenues where we can tell our stories.
Absolutely, completely agree. I think at the end of the day, the format keeps changing, but we are telling stories, whether it's around the cave fires or whether it's on OTT platforms. We are storytellers at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
We have a question from Ria. She asks,
Okay.
mythological relevance surrounding mental health still present in our society? Okay, I'd like you to give your thoughts on that. Did we have?
I think to a very great extent, what has happened is that we are living in a society where the political positions have become so extremely polarized that we have now a situation where there is one particular camp which says that anything that was meaningful, anything that is meaningful in the world, was already known in India during ancient days. Uh, and whether it is in terms of medicine, whether it's in terms of your technology, whether it's in terms of flying machines, everything came from ancient India. On the other hand, we have at 180 degrees to that, we have people who say, hey, listen, you guys are just living in the past and it's unfortunate. Move on. The present and the future is far more important. And we don't need to be going back in and digging into our ancient myths to be answering questions of today. The problem is that both are equally wrong because there is genuinely a lot of relevant stuff which was available to us during the ancient day, which we need to bring back. And on the other hand, there is a lot of stuff in the ancient which was actually rather irrelevant and rather MCP, if you very rather misogynistic at times. So, for example, I mean, I've written about Chanakya and Chanakya's chant, but if you really think about it, Chanakya was in today's day and age would be the definition of an MCP. Uh, and in that sense, many of the things that Chanakya talks about are almost scary, abhorrent in today's day and age. But yes, there is still other stuff which doesn't deserve to be thrown out simply because of that dimension of Kautilya. So I think in order to maintain our overall balance, our mental balance, we need to first pull out the political angle from all of this stuff. We need to start thinking about what is relevant to us, what is not so relevant to us. Does it make sense? Does it have some connection? To give you an example, I mean, we look at, let's say, something like the Rig Veda, and the Rig Veda has a reference to the fact that the sun travels at 2,202 yojanas in half an nimisha. It is relevant to the modern day calculation of the speed of light. Now, does that mean that because that is relevant to the speed of light, does it mean that we should also take the Ramayana at face value and say that a Pushpak Viman was used by Ravan or Ram? The point I'm making is that we need to start being able to cherry pick what are the things that are relevant and which can add value to us today, and what are the things which we need to discard upfront.
Absolutely. Learning what to take at face value and learning to read beneath what is apparent. It reminds me of Robert T. Oppenheimer's statement after the atomic blast,
Absolutely.
quoted from the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, we could take that literally and say that we had the atomic bomb back then,
Yeah.
but we could also read it as an interpretation of all pervasive and all powerful divinity.
Absolutely. And a lot of the great scientists of the world were substantively influenced by Indian philosophy. So it doesn't strike me as odd that Oppenheimer would say that I am become death, the destroyer of all worlds. I would not find that very strange. But that doesn't necessarily imply that Oppenheimer is talking about a nuclear war in the ancient age.
Absolutely. We have a question for Madhuri, which I'm going to take. How do you motivate
Hey,
yourself?
Madhuri, my favorite person. I love you, Madhuri.
She's everybody's favorite person. We love Madhuri. How do you motivate yourself to write every day with so much anxiety all around and housework? I don't think Ashwin is doing housework. I should ask Anushika, but I'll let you answer that.
No, no. I do management by sitting in my armchair, Kiran. So that I do a lot of instruction giving, but beyond that, honestly, my contribution is extremely limited. Mostly my contribution is remaining out of people's hair. I mean, just getting out of the way. I can do the greatest favor to other people. But how do I motivate myself? Frankly, it requires me very little effort to motivate myself. Because at any given point of time, I'm juggling around 8 or 10 ideas which I believe are worthwhile. So, to be able to sort of sit in front of the computer and it's the stuff that I love doing. How can it be work? I've never ever felt any of the stuff that I do is work. So I don't really need to get some sort of external stimulus in order to do what I do. Sometimes it could be a book that I'm reading or a series that I'm watching or a conversation that I'm having, and suddenly I realize that, hey, listen, there was why did that person say that, or why was that particular passage structured in the way that it was, and it leads me into a completely different direction of thought, and that's what I love doing. So it doesn't require a huge effort on my part.
Lovely. I think we should all learn from you, Ashwin, and try to be motivated. I just find myself really too anxious to write these days. I'm going to take one last question, Ashwin, because we're running out of time. But we have a whole lot of questions, and I'd love you to reply to them whenever you have the
Sure.
time. Dipti has asked, how far are you allowed to tweak history to create a modern myth? And where do you shift from history to mythology and then back again to history? That's very interesting because your books have played with this, and this is a question I know everybody wants to know.
And Dipti has asked me about my pet peeve. Hmm? So, the point is that I think where we have an issue right now, Kiran, is that we treat history as fact and we treat mythology as fiction. It's almost that's what we do. Uh, but frankly, I don't know whether history is fact. To my mind, history is just a version of events.
But
So, in that sense, uh, let's go back to the character of, let's say, Chanakya. My history textbook tells me the story of Chanakya, but the truth of the matter is that while Chanakya wrote a lot of material, whether it was the Arthashastra, the Niti Shastra, very little was written about Chanakya. And actually, the story of Chanakya comes to us from a Sanskrit play known as Mudra Rakshas, which was written almost 700 years after Chanakya had passed on. And the person who was writing it was someone called Vishaka Datta, who was actually writing a play that could be performed on stage. Now, it is very possible that Vishaka Datta was an ancient day Ashwin Sanghi, mixing fact and fiction liberally in order to create an interesting story. So, but today, for example, the story of Mitra Rakshas is almost the source of our quote unquote history. And so it was, George Santana who said that history is a pack of lies about events that never happened, written by people who were never there.
absolutely,
So,
very well said.
how much of that is factual, right? On the other hand, it was Lewis who told us that myth is a lie that reveals a deeper truth. In that sense, myth does not attempt to say that this is the factual narrative, but it's prompting you to dig deeper. Uh, and in that sense, what at least I try and do is I try and take these two concepts of myth and history and bring them charging towards one another so that I can get new combined element so that neither myth exists nor history exists, but a new element called mystery. Myth plus history equal to mystery. Now, that gives me enough play to be able to fill the spaces with my own brand of fiction. So where history is involved, for me, honestly, I don't require to tweak it. The question that Dipti asked was, how far are you allowed to tweak history? I don't need to tweak it because for every one version of a historical event, there will be five others that will suit my narrative. We have 300 versions of the Ramayana. So one of the versions has Sita killing Ravan. One of the versions has Ram as a sultan. One has Ram as a bodhisattva. One has the abduction of Kausalya instead of Sita. So the point I'm making is that I can pick whichever narrative I want in order to suit the fiction that I happen to be writing. The same applies even with history, that I can choose the version that I want.
Absolutely. I think we'll all be interested in reading the versions now that you're writing during this lockdown. And the next of the Bharat series, which you've already got started on, Ashwin. Thanks so much for chatting with us today and giving us your insights. All the best to your writing, and looking forward to seeing that creative project on an OTT platform soon.
Thank you, Kiran. And it is always such a pleasure to chat with you. I don't know, this must be probably, I guess, maybe around the 15th or 20th time that we are doing a panel of some sort together. Uh, and with you, somehow or the other, I never feel as if it's in the nature of an interview. It's just almost like a drawing room conversation. As it turns out, this is a drawing room
Bedroom
conversation, of course. But, but
conversation. Yeah.
nevertheless, I just want to convey to you that you have been an integral part of my journey, and I have really enjoyed doing this session with you. I want you to stay safe. I want you to stay happy. I want you to convey this to all your viewers that be healthy, be happy, stay safe, stay at home, and God bless. May we all come out of this not only safe and healthy, but maybe come out of this a little bit wiser
Wiser and kinder, all
and
of us.
kinder. Absolutely. So
Thank
thank
you,
you, Kiran.
Ashwin.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Bye bye. Close.